Hey everybody, welcome back to Learning with Lou, and today we're going to talk about equivalent fractions. Now, more specifically, we're going to talk about what equivalent fractions are, like what that means. We're going to talk about how we can identify them, and we're even going to talk about some ways we could find equivalent fractions by either multiplying or dividing. So, what are equivalent fractions? They're just fractions that are equal to each other. They take up the same amount of space. So take a look at this here. We got 2/4 and 4/8. These are equivalent fractions. Even though the numerators and denominators are different numbers, they're still equal fractions. And if you take a look down here, you see this circle with the fourths here, and it has two of them shaded in blue. And then you see the circle next to it that's cut into eighths, and it has four of them shaded in green. These two shapes have the same amount of space shaded in, even though it's different amounts. The 2/4, if we were to lay this circle on top of the other one, it would take up the same exact amount of space as the 4/8. And if you want to just see how this works, all we're really doing is we're taking the same amount of pieces here, and we're just cutting them up into smaller pieces. So instead of having 2/4, if you just cut these up, you can now have 1, 2, 3, 4 out of 8 total parts. That's how we get this 4/8 equal to 2/4. So, kind of like I just showed you in that 2/4 circle, you can find equivalent fractions with visuals. The first thing you have to do is draw the fraction that you're trying to find an equivalent for. So let's say we're trying to find an equivalent fraction for 1/5. I would go ahead and create 5 equal parts, and then just shade in one of them to show 1/5. Now what you do is you just cut the pieces that you have into smaller equal parts. So you start with this 1/5 here, and as you can see, there's a line here to kind of just cutting it in half. So now instead of 1/5, you have 1, 2 shaded in parts out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 total parts. So now that we've cut our piece right in half, notice how all the parts are still equal to each other. You have to make sure you still have equal parts, or else it's not correctly going to be an equivalent fraction. And you can see that 1/5 is equivalent to 2/10. Okay, so let's take a look at what we got here on this practice page. You have an example here that's filled out for you. You started out with 6/10, and you can see there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 parts shaded in orange out of 10 total parts. And then you can see that these lines were drawn here. Now, notice something. If I were to just cut this top part in half, I wouldn't have equal parts because I still have to cut this bottom in half. Now you can see each part here is the same size. And when you count them all up, you'd see that you have 12 shaded in out of 20 total parts. So 6/10 is equivalent to 12/20. I want you to pause here for a minute and see if you could draw these shapes out and cut them into equal parts to see if you can find your own equivalent fractions. Okay, so if you take a look at this first square here that was representing 1/2, I drew a line right down the middle, and I got 1, 2 shaded in parts out of 4 total parts. So 1/2 is equivalent to 2/4. Same thing over here. I had my 2/3 represented that I cut in half. So now, instead of 2/3, I really have 1, 2, 3, 4 parts shaded in out of 6 total parts. So 2/3 is equivalent to 4/6. When you're finding equivalent fractions, you're not going to want to have to draw pictures every single time, so I'm going to show you how to use multiplication as well to find equivalent fractions. All you need to do is multiply your numerator and denominator by the same number. That's very important. If you see here, I have 3/4, and what I did was my numerator times 2 and my denominator times 2. It's important that they're both the same number. I'm multiplying them both by 2. So 3/4, 3 times 2 gives me 6, 4 times 2 gives me 8, so 6/8 is equivalent to 3/4. I used multiplication to find that equivalent fraction. Now, it doesn't matter what number you choose to multiply by. You can multiply by 2, 3, 4, 5, it's up to you. I just personally think it's easiest to start with 2 and 3 because they're the two lowest numbers. You're going to have some easy multiplication. So you could see some other examples here. 3/4, I multiplied my numerator and denominator both by 3 this time. I kept it the same number that I'm multiplying both of them by. So 3 times 3 gives me 9. 4 times 3 gives me 12, so 9/12 is also equivalent to 3/4, as well as 12/16. This is where I multiplied my numerator and denominator both by 4. And you can see this example on the bottom here, there's this big red X. This is an example of what not to do. Do not multiply your numerator by 2 and then your denominator by 3. You didn't find an equivalent fraction. If you do 3 times 2 is 6 and 4 times 3 is 12, 6/12 and 3/4 are not equivalent. You did it incorrectly. You have to make sure you're multiplying both numerator and denominator by the same number. So here we have a few fractions. I want you to try to find an equivalent fraction for each one using multiplication. So how about you pause here and take a few minutes to see what you can do. So here are some of my answers, but yours may be different and that's okay. It depends on what you multiplied by. So as you can see, for some of them, I chose to multiply both my numerator and denominator by 2, and for others, I chose to multiply my numerator and denominator by 3. As long as you multiplied your numerator and denominator both by the same number, and your multiplication is correct, you've got the correct answer. Here are just some sample answers you can look at, but if you followed the same process, you got the correct equivalent fractions. One last thing I'm going to show you here is that you could also find equivalent fractions by using division. So let's say you have a fraction that already has pretty high numbers, like for example 8/12, and you don't really want to use multiplication. You can use division. What you have to do first if you're going to use division is you have to find a common factor between your numerator and denominator. So for example, I listed out my factors of 8. So I got 1, 2, 4, and 8. And then I listed out my factors of 12, which are 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. And just in case you forgot what a factor is a number that can be multiplied by something to equal the number that you're looking for. So for example, factors of 8, these are all numbers that can be multiplied by something to equal 8. Same thing with factors of 12. These are all numbers here in this list that can be multiplied by something to equal 12. That's what makes it a factor of 12. Now that I have my two factor lists, I'm going to go ahead and take a look. Are there any common factors? Now, obviously, number 1 is always going to be a factor, but we're just going to ignore that because if you were to divide 8/12 by 1, you would just end up with 8/12. You didn't find anything new. So I see that 2 is a shared number. And I see that 4 is also a shared factor, so I'm going to go ahead and divide by, well, both of them just to show you the examples. So since 2 and 4 are the common factors, I'm going to divide by them, but it's really important that whichever one you choose, just like with multiplication, you divide your numerator and denominator by the same number. Don't divide your numerator by 2 and then divide your denominator by 4. You will not be finding an equivalent fraction. So as you can see here, for 8/12 divided by 2, I have 8 divided by 2 is 4, and 12 divided by 2 is 6, so 4/6 is equivalent to 8/12. So that's all we have for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you feel like you learned something from this, please do me a favor and hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe for more content in the future. If you like the resources that you see me using in the videos, like for example this page here that explains and shows what equivalent fractions are, the practice problem, the steps on how to find equivalent fractions, all of these resources that I use are available for you to download on my website, and you could find the link in the description. Again, thank you so much for watching, and never stop learning.